It's time to get all the latest with all things New York Jets and the NFL Scoops business, and we do it with a special guest coming up next, right here on The Boy Green Show.
Zoinks! It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field gosh darn Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Aaron Rodgers is joining the show. What's up, Adam? But Trevor gosh darn Sycamore, baby. For me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever been.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas. Hey everybody, my name is Paul Liston Jr., a.k.a. Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, and we are graced with royalty here on the program. Let's bring her in. You know who this woman is. Josina Anderson, NFL Insider, and of course the Queen. Let's bring her right here on the show. Proper introduction. Proper bow to the best in the business. Josina, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. You're very persistent, and definitely we can feel your love and your fandom for your team, and you do a lot of hard work getting the news out, to the fan base across, the tri-state area. So definitely appreciate coming on. Happy to talk about Jets since they are the center of the NFL universe right now.
Yeah, that's right. And before we get into Jets specifically, first off, my question is, how do you do what you do? And I understand that it's like asking Michael Jordan, how'd you just make that shot? And he just kind of shrugs and says, I don't know. I just did it. But at the end of the day, Josina, I think personally, from the outside world of watching you and your career and what makes you tick, is you seem to get more out of your subjects, your guest, the person that you're interviewing, than anyone else that may have been asking a question. How do you do that? It's like your ability with the questions, how you frame them, how you set them up. There's something magical about what you do that always seems to get more than the normal interviewer. Why?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. To answer your question, I would say that everything starts with relationships first and foremost, and not just a relationship from the standpoint of, the connection, so to speak, but the trust. And the trust comes from the authenticity I feel like the subject can feel from you as a journalist, not just in being real, so to speak, but also in terms of the way that they are treated, knowing that you're going to have a fair conversation, you're going to have an objective lens, you're not, out to, be malicious and, and unjust in a very skewed way, so to speak. So all of those things kind of make up the relationship. And then I think, from there, it's just being yourself. Like, I don't know any other way to do it. I'm not the most, conventional reporter. And what I mean by that is like, I can talk the King English, and then I can, talk to where people feel, comfortable as well. It's kind of like what Jay-Z said. He can, he can walk into a boardroom and still have sneakers on. He's still going to be him and still, have the white collar essence, so to speak, but he can, talk blue collar if need be. And I'm just saying, what I mean by that kind of illustration is just being able to meet anybody wherever they are. And then, I think too, it's just showing people that you care about the long term. I've been fortunate enough to break news for a long time. And so any story that comes is not like, oh my God, this is my one thing and I have to get it no matter what, and I'm willing to sacrifice whoever, whatever. Like, it's like, no, I understand the benefit of, the long-term rapport in terms of the communication, knowing that the person doesn't have to talk to you. And so you do have to bear that in mind.
That's a great point, Josina, because yeah, I guess I'll just spill the beans here. Is that the Dalvin Cook thing, and also obviously a story that you've been giving us all the juicy deets. We'll get into that in a little bit. But, I was speaking with his agent, and maybe 2 weeks, a week and a half before the visit was announced by the NFL Network crew, his agent told me that a visit was being set up. And I was weighing exactly what you're talking about. I can scream to the street, Dalvin Cook's coming, baby. The visit is happening. But I wanted to weigh, the tipping of the cap of the source that gives it to you to just scream it or, to just run with it. So I was weighing back and forth. Ultimately, I chose not to do so because I wanted the long-term relationship. I didn't want the burn of, hey, I got the visit before anyone else. I wanted to kind of let it breathe. So it seems like it is on a much lower level. Obviously, for me, it is that fine line of making those kind of decisions with relationship building.
Yeah, and oftentimes too, when I report something and I tweet something, it probably is, if you think of a gear shift in a car and the most of what you hear is, fifth gear, I downshift a lot from what I heard to what can go on Twitter. And a lot of times, especially with things that are more sensitive, I'm downshifting. And then not only that, but sometimes too, it's just the natural instinct just to protect it, even though a great example of that is Denzel Mims. So, a couple of weeks ago or whenever that story, happened, and I put it out there that, it was the energy was building, for potential transaction to the Detroit Lions. Well, an hour or 2 hours before I tweeted that, I already got the text that's saying he's going to Detroit. So
yeah,
I already had that. That was the sentiment. What I was trying to do is, in addition to that person who I already knew it was straight, was just to see if I could, hear it from two other, entities. And, the one didn't respond, and the other side, I can't even remember what it was, but whatever it was, I was just like, let me downshift it. And I knew that the person was straight, but I don't say this to say, like I'm popping my collar, but I'm trying to give context to the fact that it's just like, this is a dime a dozen, right? It's not that big of a deal to me. I just downshift it, whatever. And then, someone came 3 minutes after me. I knew it, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? It's like, now if it's something that's, major, something like that. There are times, like, for example, when Amari Cooper was getting traded, and I got the text, and I missed the text, and it was sitting there for 45 minutes. It's the one Sunday I decided to not only clean my apartment, but have a Mary J. Blige concert in my home. So I didn't hear my phone. Yeah. And I typically, my phones are typically like right beside me. And, this one morning, I just decided to leave them in the bed, and I'm just like, I'm sleeping. And, I have this TV on, it's got YouTube blasting and all this other stuff. And then I walk back into my room. I look at it, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even look at my phone for the rest of the day. It was sitting there for like an hour. You know what I mean? And then, so it's those that are the ones that really get you. So, but yeah, essentially, that's what it comes down to. It's always been about the long term. It's always been about genuine relationships and just being myself. I'm not trying to be an anchor and this is how I talk. Like I'm going to be me. My hair is going to look like, my nails are going to look like, whatever. But when my mouth is moving, I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
I love that. Again, we're speaking with the queen herself, Josina Anderson. She is here, baby. Undefined CBS NFL insider. She brings the business to the table, if I may, here on the show. And Josina, you've broken a lot of NFL stories. Everyone's been like, per Josina Anderson. Is that an adrenaline rush when you get that? Once you get one, are you just hungry for another fix? How does that work? Because I don't think a lot of common average people understand the NFL scoop business.
Well, I feel like it's kind of seasonal to how it works for me. So like this time of year and during the regular season, because, you're moving around and you're covering games and you're trying to do your podcasts or whatever, I'm zoned in, and obviously there's news I'm breaking during the season, but I'm probably operating at a I would say a 40% clip. And because I'm busy doing other things, I can't just sit there and stare at TweetDeck all day and get every advancement that's coming in to be able to up the next up. So this is why when we get to March, or even before that, January, and you're going through the coaching carousel, and it's Black Monday as it's called, and all that other stuff, you start to sense that, my clip is upping because now I have more time to just zone in on just, news itself. And there's only so many notifications of people's Twitter pages that I can have on without, wanting to put a pencil in my neck. You know what I'm saying? Because it's so much, you know what I'm saying? And even now, as I get older, obviously, and I've been in the business, I've been doing this 20 years, I think this year even more so is like trying to strike that balance between getting stuff that I need to get done for myself, in addition to, servicing the people and the things that pay me, and doing what I love on the professional end. But, this is a very volatile business. And I would say to any young person out there, make sure you're taking the time to, do what you're supposed to do, but also what else you need to do to keep your nest strong with other things. And so you can't get so caught up that, you're left with your pants down, so to speak. And that certainly happened to me before in my career. And I'm trying to learn from that. So, yeah.
Wow. I love the beautiful words and the vulnerability there. I think people are going to really dig that. From you, Josina. So let's throw a little bit of this Jets action into the mix, if we may. And Josina, you with some inside scoopage here on the Dalvin Cook thing. You shared on Twitter this week. Let me get the glasses out to get a little gander here. Okay, that the Jets didn't sense an immediate rush from Cook's side to do a deal. And I ask you, is that something from your perception that rubbed the Jets the wrong way in some sense, or were they cool with it? It's an interesting observation because, if you're on a date and then you can sense that, man, they are really not willing to close the business here. It could give you a different vibe potentially.
So I think it's not overcomplicated. I think first and foremost, it ties back to the 2 points that I made were really important for Dalvin Cook to ace during his Jets visit. And that's one, showing the Jets that the Jets are the number one choice. And then two, that he is okay with deferring to Breece Hall if and when need be. So part of Dalvin Cook getting back to the Jets organization is, them hearing and, his responses after time of reflection, or maybe even more responses, so to speak, with how things were posed to him and the comfort level that, they need to have with respect to the messages that were conveyed to him while he's in the building. And then secondly, and this was even heard before Dalvin Cook came there, and obviously is a part of it too, is just that, I was told in general that it wasn't a big rush for him even before, he got there as well. And I think from a business standpoint, it makes sense because clearly, and the representative has to, do their job with kind of harvesting, the market and all that other stuff. So that's a part of it too. And then the part of it is, this training camp, the regular season's after Labor Day. So you have that. And then the other component is that, his shoulder injury or the shoulder surgery rather was, had in February, according to reports, as far as the timing on that. And so, my understanding, with that is that, and try to phrase this carefully, like I said on Twitter, was that there wasn't a major shift, at least from the Jets, understanding as far as the timing on the recovery from that. But I also didn't get the sense that, everything was all the way ready right this, second. Doesn't mean that it's off timing, to be clear. It just, so I do think that that's a part of it. However, to make sure I really, really underline that, I didn't hear any major concern, which is what I tweeted about that yesterday, as of everything I've heard so far. So I think all those things, at this point. So, all things combined, we heard the general manager from the Miami Dolphins speak up and just say, that whether they do or they do not sign Dalvin, they like the running back group that they have. So, whatever that means. So listen, this is not the first rodeo for any of the general managers or the front offices that are dealing with this. They know what time it is and how these things get done. Okay. So no one's fooling anybody, with respect, but we all understand that, teams want the best for their teams with their current situations. And we know that the player is, and fairly so, trying to get the best value for his services. So we get all of that.
Were those two things checked out? There are two beautiful things, and you're right. Of course, the Jets, yeah, baby. I want to be number one on your list. I don't want to be in the top 5. I don't want to be third, Well,
and because they also got burned, and I say that, in air quotes from the way that the sources posed it and in terms of how the Jets feel. I mean, make sure always, clear in the understanding, not how I feel, but, that the organization went through this with Tyreek Hill, and I heard that come up a lot as far as their sentiments, an organization sometimes will feel like, they might be being leveraged, for a deal that a player ultimately wants, potentially somewhere else. And so that was, the sentiments I was hearing from sources, not wanting that to be a repeat situation. But, we'll see. But I do think ultimately with what's going on with the running back market, that there is some pressure on Dalvin Cook's, side as far as us seeing what number he ultimately, gets on this deal. He is sitting on $2 million that he's of his salary that was guaranteed for his 2023, regardless of being with the Vikings. I think Boomer Esiason had reported that that at least his report, I don't have the exact figure, but I know that report was out there at some point that he was, offered a $7 million or $7 million was on the table or something like that.
From the Vikings, correct.
Right.
Yes.
From the Vikings. So we'll see. Obviously, we expect him to get more than what was on the table from the Vikings, but there are players who choose to take the restructured deal, like the Joe Mixons, some who, do not. And, obviously the goal is to get more than what you would have had. You know what I mean?
Of course. And Aaron Rodgers takes this massive pay cut, and he said one of the reasons he chose to do so was so the team would have some flexibility in making some moves, whether it was now or at the deadline. Josina, a lot of fans have speculated, trying to connect the dots of what that could mean. Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers, trade deadline, money suddenly available. He was on the gram saying, ooh, that looks pretty good there with Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Not quite salty, but he was missing. He felt like a missing piece to that puzzle. Could that be Josina out there? Possibly, floating in the mix.
We saw, I think Davante or somebody, spoke up on that report and said that it wasn't true. I haven't spoken to Davante directly. If I was, in Las Vegas, I feel like, whenever I show up, we do have a good conversation. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is cognizant of the fact that he, as of right now, wants to be with the Jets longer than a year and wants to make sure he's giving the team that flexibility. As far as, the money that helps getting a player like a Dalvin Cook. I mean, look, and I've said this with the conversations that I had over the weekend with the sources, like I get, the desire to make sure to a degree it's understood about deferring to Breece Hall. But, in the same kind of conversations I'm having is like, we also know from the history of the NFL that typically a player coming off an ACL is stronger in the second year than in that first year. Yes. And so it does make sense to have a player like Dalvin to kind of take up some of that tread at the beginning of the outset. So you're not overdoing Breece, and more importantly, not putting him in danger of some sort of compensation injury, which would just devastate Jets fans and him as well. So.
100%. All right, let's get a couple quickies before we get out of here. Josina, you have been quite outspoken on Zach Wilson as QB2. You are not a fan, Miss JoJo, on Zach Wilson as QB2. Do you still stand by that take that you had during the offseason over the summer as the QB2 to Aaron Rodgers? Do you stand by that?
So here's the deal with that. It's not that I'm not a fan of Zach Wilson, and I know you carefully phrased it. I know you said at
Yes.
QB2.
Right.
But so obviously, and nothing I say is personal to him.
Of course. Of course.
And I know you weren't intimating that, but my point with that is that I never want to be a person who caps anyone's ability of what they can, do, achieve, or evolve in life, because I don't want anybody to do that to me. However, in the context of things that are already occurred in the past, and using that to illuminate at least where we are right now, or immediately where the Jets are going into, he does have some mental ghosts that he has to reckon with, as far as what can be conjured in his mind when he's back in the field of play. And so you have to have certain things really go positively, not only in his first, game back, whenever that would be, but even after that first game, and that second game, and that third game. So my concern is, if for some reason he encounters adversity and it doesn't go his way, that he potentially could be in danger of a more, down spiral mentally, a la kind of what happened to Carson Wentz when it wouldn't go. And the thing that I noticed with Carson, observing him, was that, when the pressure wasn't really, really on him, like, for example, let's say, God forbid, Aaron Rodgers goes down in a game, Zach Wilson comes in the game, I'm not really evaluating that game, because the pressure really, you're playing with that's a house money game. Where I'm really seeing if your sand is really settled in your head is in the second and third and fourth game after that. Now when you're really expected, to come in with that burden in terms of where it is. And I found at times when that happened to Carson, that some of the old vestiges of doubt started to creep back in. So that is my concern. And sometimes the best way to clear that is with a new environment, a la what Geno Smith had. So, we'll see. Doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means that there's a greater likelihood, should he encounter adversity early, that could happen. And that's what my concern was.
Yeah, a wonderful interview Josina Anderson had on it. Undefined. You can see the beautiful branding behind her. Of course, you guys should be listening to the show wherever you find your podcast, and the YouTube channel, for that matter. And it goes back to that relationship you were talking about. I don't know if you left this in on purpose, Josina. I know you got a wonderful team around you of superstars, but at the end of your interview with Garrett, you guys are like getting up, like the interview was over, but like almost the cameras were rolling a little bit extra. And Garrett was like asking you like personal stuff, like, hey, how long are you in camp? Like, he didn't go like, oh, thank God this interview's over, and like sprint away, which like goes to the point that I started this interview with, that you seem to have relationships with these players that extend beyond just a Q&A. Hey, here's the question. Okay, great. Thanks, Garrett. See you later. Like, you've got, there's some love here. There's some juice that you bring to the table.
Well, I've been around a long time, and obviously not for Garrett, because he's a new player.
Sure.
But I would say this, and I do, if there's one thing I could take a little bit of pride in, I will say this. It's the fact that I do feel like when people do interviews with me, it's because they want to. It's not because they have to, or it's mandated based off of who the interview works for and all that other stuff. And I think you get my drift from, Garrett wanted to do that interview. He didn't have to do that. That was extra. And I appreciate him for that. And there's all mutual respect between myself, the players, the GMs, and, whatever. Even the other day when I was calling, I was reporting this stuff about Dalvin Cook, still called the agent, get his thoughts or whatever. And I give people equal opportunity to weigh in, whether they take it or not. That's, up to them. But I try to, be as balanced as possible, even during, other, I'll just say, sensitive, big time stories that have gone on in the course of my career. So I do appreciate that people, when they have an option, that they do say yes. And that none of these interviews that you see on my podcast or in my career have ever been paid for. So.
Wow, which again just goes to show, right? It would make it even an easier. Oh, I understand. They're paid for that. Oh, they weren't. They just wanted to do it of their own volition. Did you learn anything from that conversation with Garrett that you had sitting down there in Florham Park? Anything stand out to you about that chat you had?
Well, I already knew that he is very humble and that he
Hmm.
is reflective, but I appreciate that he has when I asked him sort of a tougher question about his emotions last season when things weren't going
Yes.
well. I love the fact that he took it right on the chest. He heard the question, and that kind of goes back to what you were asking me before. I do think part of interviewing, in addition to obviously the authenticity and all that stuff we were talking about, what's another extremely, extremely important thing is question phrasing. I take that
Mm.
very seriously. Even though it looks like I'm just riffing and rapping and da 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 da, I have thought through what I am saying and how I am saying it. And when I write out my questions, they typically always start longer and they just keep getting shorter and shorter because I need to be able to recall it, by just looking down. And then
Right.
also it's how am I posing the order of what I'm saying. And so if you notice in that question, I basically, I said, is this something that you need to adjust? You know what I'm saying? And even when you say
Mm.
that, that could suggest that I think he needs to adjust it. And I'm not necessarily saying that,
Yeah.
but I also came back on the back half of that question. I said, or is it something that you need, right, to, fully maximize yourself on the field? But I posed it that way strategically so that he had a valve to answer that question. You see what I'm saying? And they also
Yes.
knew it wasn't like, you know what I mean? And so there,
Yeah. Right.
there's a way with that. But to answer your question, yeah, I love the way that he takes it on the chest. He's extremely mature. Any league sources I talk to about Garrett Wilson, they always say that's a solid young man. They say that he's a great guy. Everyone has great things to say. So I feel like the Jets with Sauce and Garrett and obviously the rest of their draft picks, but those two in particular, and Brees and Jermaine and whatever, all those guys, they really did a good job getting quality people.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And again, that was beautiful. I think that's the first time Garrett actually answered that in the way that you asked it, Justina. A lot of people on the outset's going, "Oh man, this guy seemed pretty emotional when answering those questions." That was the first time he kind of took it on the chin. Said, "Actually, I really grew from that." So that was beautiful. So, Josina, this is the last one before we get you out of here, and it's simply this:
It's all right. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers. Jets. Are we going to the ship, baby? That's what we want to know. Are we going to the ship? Am I going Keanu Reeves hardball, getting everybody together, hopping and jumping around that we're going to the ship? Is that happening?
I think that the Jets have an excellent chance to go to the Super Bowl so long as they withstand attrition. But one of the key factors that I think will help boost their chances is not only because Aaron Rodgers is there, but more importantly, it's what Aaron Rodgers' impact is on the defense. By having Aaron Rodgers out there and the offense being on the field longer, the Jets defense is going to get that much more rest, which is so important statistically, when it comes to being able to not only be effective with all the stunts and pass rushes and everything that they're doing in the first quarter, but it lasting to the fourth quarter. And so
Yes.
when I asked DJ Reed about that in practice, he was already predicting, more turnovers and things like that. So that should be theoretically the effect. I'm looking forward, to seeing that. I do think that all things considered, it still would have been nice to see OBJ as a part of the Jets. And the reason why I say that is because I do like the Eagles model of having more than one X on the team.
Yes.
I do think that, the way they spread AJ Brown and Davante Smith and all that other stuff is helpful and provides more insurance. That being said, I do think it would be helpful if they achieve that with Dalvin Cook relative to Brees Hall. But they have an excellent excellent chance. But y'all got Von Miller the first game. Von Miller gonna become. I know Von Miller since day one when I was living in Denver and covering the Broncos all those years I was out there, and I know that Von Miller is going to be come around the corner to put him in half from jump. So he better have his skates on in that game. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. The offensive line's going to be important. We'll see if Von is ready. I know he got injured last year, so we'll see if he's suiting up. I know he wants to for that Monday Night Football game. Josina, you brought it up. Why the hell did OBJ not end up with the Jets? Everyone was saying it's happening. Maybe it's just the obvious bag of money that the Baltimore Ravens dropped on his doorstep. But I mean, man, that just seemed like by all accounts that was happening. And then all of a sudden the rug got pulled out and it didn't.
Yeah. So I would say up until 2 days before he signed with the Ravens, I thought he was going to the Jets. And that's just how much it was, Jets. And Sauce was, he's feeling the relationship there and things like that. But there is one thing that happened that helped to kind of bring that down that I can't say on your podcast, but something that happened that people are not aware of. And then, then two, I would say that, yes, obviously the money is a factor. And anytime I say this about, I get slammed on Twitter. And first of all, these people think I care. It's like, I'm in my 40s now. It's like, I think it's funny, but whatever. Anyways. Yeah. So, I say that, listen, it was not just about the money. Like, obviously, he leveraged it. He got 15 up to 18, but it was really important. And he said this in his press conference. I already knew it because he said it to me 9 billion times, of the vibe he was feeling from the team and the love. And sometimes in trying to get a player to understand what the advanced thinking is on what their role would be, you can overdo it in trying to explain it to the player. You know what I'm saying? And I kept saying over and over again to anybody that would listen or call me and ask me my opinion, OBJ doesn't need that pitch. He doesn't need it. If you are going to ask me, I'm going to tell you, he doesn't need that pitch. He already just came from a Rams team where he deferred to Cooper Kupp when necessary. But in his mind, it's not deferring, it's acclimating. And then when he's ready, he's still going to be who he's going to be, like you saw in the first half of the Super Bowl. You see what I'm saying? And how he had more production in the red zone. So that was a big deal. And I feel like, I know, trust me when I say I know, that the Jets are trying to, adjust their rhetoric, when it comes to the presentation of that in this situation now to Brees, to a certain extent, because it matters. These are all alpha males and A-type personalities and things like that. And you can say things right off the jump that kind of, make them tune out. You see what I'm saying? Because everybody thinks they're the man. So it's not people don't necessarily want to hear defer. They want to hear, are you willing to compete? You see that this is why phrasing is so important. It's important because the way I said it and the way that is it feels like two different things. You see what I'm saying?
It very much does. Josina, 40s. I mean, you don't look a day over 21. I mean,
well, your mama taught you well. I know that's not what you really think, but I appreciate it being said. I'm holding back. I don't have any, I don't think I have any wrinkles just yet. I do my routine and all that other stuff, and I got my mama's genes and all that other stuff. But I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
Well, I love that. Well, by the way, God bless Mama JoJo. She did phenomenal work as far as I'm concerned. Well, Josina, thank you so much for jumping on the show. You're a busy woman. You're one of the best in the business, and we appreciate you carving out the time here to talk a little bit about your gig and also, of course, some wonderful New York Jets stuff. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you do great work, too, and all your energy, enthusiasm, and your diligence with doing your work. So, keep that up, keep striving, keep going beyond whatever you think it is that you can do so that you can go beyond where you think you can go.
Well, thank you so much, Miss Josina Anderson. Thank you. We'll all be following your work. Feel free. How can I not give the plug? I mean, it's all behind you, baby. But Undefined, let us know where we can hit them up and anything else. Come on, lay it on the line for us.
You can just go to wherever you get your podcast to hear, either the crew or Undefined. I'm still deciding if I'm doing the crew this year just because I'm, just trying to figure out all I want to have on my plate. But, for right now, you can type in the crew and the pod and the Undefined with Josina Anderson, wherever you get your pods. I primarily put all the links out on my Twitter or Instagram, so you can always access everything there. And then obviously, when it comes to me being a senior NFL insider, you can catch me on CBS Sports.
There you go. Beautiful. Josina Anderson, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
There she is,